into what you told us is going to be some of the heaviest things that we've ever heard.
Yeah, this is, for those who know the Harbinger, this is the continuation of the Harbinger. This is where the mystery is. This is where we are now. The question is, are we approaching judgment now? Has the mystery, the ancient mystery, the template of national judgment, has it continued? Is it continuing right now? Is everything that's happening, the shaking, the unrest, the fires, the plagues, all this, that the paralysis of America, is this part of the mystery? Is this part of the Harbinger? Is it part of what we shared years ago as the warning? And we said that, and the Harbinger says these things are going to come. So is it so? So the Harbinger 2 is a book that the only book I've held off for years and years and years to write, because I knew I could only do it at the right set appointed time. And it was last year when I was praying, and the Lord said, this is the year, and it's going to be a year of shaking. And the mystery of the Harbinger is going to resume. So you have to get this word out. It's a trumpet call. God's people have to know, and people who don't know the Lord have to know. This is you have to get the prophetic word out. So the Harbinger 2 is going to be opening up, first of all, the unrevealed, things I could not reveal for years that go back to 9/11, but that are affecting us right now. It's called the unrevealed. The second part is what has happened since the Harbinger. That is, the Harbingers have continued, the signs have continued, the warnings have continued right in our day up to the present day. And the last part is what is happening now. What is there a mystery behind it? There is a biblical mystery behind the plague that we're dealing, the coronavirus, everything. And where is it heading? And where is it going? And what do we need to know as believers to deal with and to stand in the days to come and the years to come? What do we need to know? So I knew this was probably the most timely, critical thing I could ever do, which is the Harbinger 2. So this is the only book that I've held off for years and years and years until the set time, and the time is now.
Yeah. Yesterday we ended the broadcast with the question about the connection between the Harbingers and the act of abortion. And the Lord spoke to me for years, and I sound like a broken record, but he said, I can't bear the murder of my unborn children anymore. And I believe the judgment, I personally believe that the this plague, we're having a worldwide plague. And I believe with all my heart, it's God's tears of warning for the abortion of our children, not just America's children. 60 million American children. 50% of the black children have been aborted. And now worldwide, 60 million a year over the world. How do you think God looks? Somebody used to say, I wonder if God cries. I think he does cry. But this act of abortion, what is it? What do you think it's connected to the Harbingers? And you feel like it's connected?
Yeah, we're going to see something very, very strong and very prophetic and very powerful in this program about that. And the first thing is, that clearly it is exactly what you said in the Bible. The Bible says that really the key reason that judgment came to Israel, in ancient Israel, destroyed it, was the sin of offering up their children in sacrifice. Now, there were many other sins that were all part of that judgment, but it was all compressed into that key sin. It was kind of the epitome of sins against all that they were doing was all bound up in that sin, and the judgment came. So now America has followed the same path as ancient Israel. That's what the Harbinger is saying. All these things, we're following it, including the offering up of children. And we have, as you said, Israel killed thousands of people, thousands of children. We have killed millions of them. And the thing is that God cannot overlook that. And the thing is that with that, we saw last time that there was a link between the Twin Towers going up and that sin, that it all began, the abortion on demand spreading to the nation began in New York. So did the towers It began in 1970, so the first tower was finished in that year in New York. It was completed, the Twin Towers were completed in 1973, so abortion was completed in America in 1973. And we shared last time that the same hand that signed the papers to build that tower, build the Twin Towers, same hand that began abortion on demand in this land. So all these things, and then you had 9/11. Then, in the Bible, judgment comes to the place where the sin was. Well, it's not only that, but it has continued. And that is something happened just relatively recently, some people took note of it at the time, but they even wondered if there would be judgment. And what happened is it was New York, again, the same land, the same place from which abortion was birthed to this country. In 2019, they did something, they took it further, they crossed a line, and it came from New York. New York voted to legalize abortion, in effect, to the point of birth. They tried to deny it, but it was the fact. The law that they did, and the Governor Cuomo, he demanded that the legislature would pass this law. And so they did. And what day did they pass it? They passed it on January 22nd, the same date that abortion became the law of America, the law of the land. So they were celebrating abortion. Again, New York was leading the country, pushing to crossing the line, pushing to this now where the line between abortion and infanticide becomes blurred. And when they did it, if you remember, they passed it in the legislative building. They stood up and they cheered and cheered this. And people are wondering, is this going to be judgment? And there is something there. There is in the Harbinger too. There's a chapter on this called Tophet, and then there's another chapter called the Plague. Because this is going to open up a whole nother thing, and that is that in that same building is the building that began the World Trade Center, that New York State building. It began abortion, and it did this in 2019. And when it happened, the governor of New York gave an order to light up the Harbinger, to light up the tower at Ground Zero. Now remember, this is the tower that is linked to Isaiah 9:10, the Tower of Defiance. We will rebuild. It's the tower that has words inscribed on it. We won't go through it now, where Obama inscribed words that were basically Isaiah 9:10 on the top of it, words of defiance. This is a Tower of Defiance. Now it's lit up to celebrate this horrific, gruesome, bloody act of America. And it's lit up in the color pink. It's supposed to be a color of women. It's also the color of babies. And so here it is. And now the Harbinger, which is a warning of judgment to come, is lit up in New York City. And you know that in the just like the first tower was linked to abortion, so now this tower was this is one of the 9 harbingers. And not only that, people took note of it, but in the building where they passed this demonic law, there's actually a carving of a face in the building in the New York State Legislative Building, which they call the demon. And so all these things began, and then it was not even, that was at the beginning of the year. Before the year even ended, the plague began. It was 2019. The plague began the same year. And the plague would come especially to New York City, as we're going to see, and would come to the world, but the whole world, by the way, has been offering up babies. But New York, America and New York are central. And so we're going to see some amazing things as we get to that. But the answer is yes, in the Bible, not only does judgment come, especially based on the blood of the innocent, of children, but it also, in the Bible, the book of Jeremiah, it takes one of the forms it takes is the form of a pandemic or plague. That's exactly what happens, and it's going to be amazing. But one of the things I want to get in is even the timing of this is amazing, and it was all in the Harbinger. And I know we'll want to get there.
The plague, this plague, is the one that we're in right now, right? So
Yeah.
that plague, you're connecting it to abortion, and New York, the plague has been the strongest. Is that right?
Yeah. The plague has struck New York, even to this day. You know, when you have other parts that are hotspots, the death toll of New York was more than any other place, and there was no place hit as. And New York was the capital of it's the capital of abortion, and it became the capital of the plague. But we're going to see that there's even more eerie things that link this all together. But absolutely yes. But even the timing of it. Even the timing is according to the biblical template of judgment that began in the Harbinger. And it even when I look back at the Harbinger and I looked at the chapter called Things to Come, it was all there.
Wow, this is so powerful. People, if you don't read this book, you're going to be out of the loop because you need to know every detail of what's coming. Here we are. We're at the end of time as far as I'm concerned. These are the last days. And if you don't believe it, is the love of many wax cold? Of course. What are they doing? Rioting in the streets, murdering in the streets, burning and looting beyond anything. And I'll talk more about it next week, but I'm telling you, these are the days that God told us. And here, you know, we had 9/11, which was the Harbinger. That was what Harbinger means. What? Things to come. Is that right, Rabbi?
Yes, it's a shadow, a warning, or a herald of things to come.
And this is, we set TV back 50 years at least with what we're doing now. All of us are in America, but we're doing it because of the coronavirus. But this virus is a part of the judgment of God. This thing won't stop. People don't get it. God showed me at at New Year's that something was coming that was worldwide, a horrible judgment of God. And I believe it is. And just what Rabbi has told us these things. He told us about 9/11. The very same act now. And I'm going to ask you this question I asked you yesterday, and we never got the chance to do it. But do you think that the new tower, World Trade Center, do you think this will be included in what God's going to do?
Yeah, it could be. First of all, a few things that you remember, and I mentioned this is in the Harbinger too, that there was two harbingers that represented the defiance of the nation after that warning strike, which in this case is 9/11. That remained. One was the Erez tree, that cedar that they planted in Ground Zero, where the sycamore had fallen, just according to Isaiah 9:10, which is a symbol that, hey, America, we're going to come back stronger than before. The other was the we will rebuild, which was the tower. So you have two of them. Now the other harbinger, the Erez tree, what happened to it, which represented America? It withered away, biblical sign of judgment. It had its branches cut off, biblical sign of national judgment. And then it was struck down, it was destroyed on a Hebrew holy day. And the holy day was Passover. And that night, the moon turned blood red. It was also an eclipse, another biblical sign. But a sign, the fall of the Erez tree in the Bible is a sign of the fall of a nation. And so you have the other sign, the only harbinger of the nine that is left standing of defiance is that tower. Could something happen? It could. I mean, in the Harbinger 2, I also speak in visions, and so it speaks about, that, it alludes to different things, but and even the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of America, and I use that as a symbol also of America falling. And if you remember, just recently, just before we started the first part of these programs, we found out something, and that is that there was suddenly a lightning storm in New York City, and the lightning struck two objects, and the one object was the Statue of Liberty, or went right behind it. It kind of actually, and I'll tell you something I didn't say. It's notice it's touching it's going by the pedestal. That's where a prophetic act that I was part of, I'll share at the end, before 9/11 took place right there on that corner, on that pedestal, right where the lightning is going, exactly there. And that's where we'll get into it. That's where the prophetic images come from. And the other object was the World Trade Center, the Tower of Defiance. And so you have the two things happening at the same time. So I believe we need to be ready. We can't say exactly how the things will happen, but the thing is that both those things are symbols of America, and that the World Trade Center is a symbol of America's prosperity, its financial power, its world preeminence. And I believe that if we do not come back, the warning of the Harbinger too, is that power will fall. Whether or not the tower falls, that power will fall.
Well, this is so powerful, Rabbi. This book is so powerful. If for those who love reading your books, this is the one now that brings all of it together. You have a chapter in the new book called The Plague. It's chapter 29. Am I going too far ahead in the book? But what about this plague? And it's lasting. God showed me this plague was coming. I don't understand. The Bible says that he's going to tell his prophets when things are going to happen. But God told me on New Year's Eve that this was God's judgment coming, and this plague doesn't seem to stop. You write about it in the book. I'm chapter 29. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the first thing is that remember what we've spoken about, and remember what the warning has been. We have said, and the Harbinger says, it's a template of national judgment, and it's replaying now in America. That's where all these things happen. Now, it was there in America's fall from God. We have been falling as ancient Israel did. But it was there also on 9/11 with that first strike. That's the classic, for those who don't know, the classic template of judgment. First comes this strike before the big things come. First comes, years before, comes a strike of an enemy, and it shakes the nation. It's limited, it's contained, but it's a wake-up call. Then there is this window of time that the nation is given. I've spoken about this when I've been with you. The window of time that the nation has to turn back to God, or to either turn back for revival or head for judgment. Well, the thing is that with ancient Israel, what happened in the template? They didn't come back to God. They turned away. And what happened is they headed to judgment. Well, America, what have we seen with the harbinger? What was that all these harbingers that appeared, the tree and the stone and all those things? What were they harbingers of? They were all linking up with that first strike on ancient Israel, that scripture, Isaiah 9:10. And the people in that scripture, they were saying, we are not turning back to God. We're going to go farther away from God. In fact, we're going to be defiant. And so all those harbingers weren't just saying that God was warning the nation of judgment. It was a harbinger warning that if you don't turn back from God, you are going to head away, and you're going to get harder and harder, and then judgment's going to come. Well, all that was prophesied by the harbingers. The harbingers were saying this is the way America was going, and we have gone that way. Remember what happened. One of the harbingers, the original harbingers, is that on the day after 9/11, that the Senate Majority Leader, Tom Daschle, who presents America's response, that ancient Israel had a response too, and what he does at the end of his speech is he actually recites word for word the ancient vow that the leaders of ancient Israel recited when they were struck, and it led them to judgment. So he was identifying America he was Isaiah 9:10 from the Capitol as the nation under judgment, and he said at the end, he recited Isaiah 9:10 before the world, and then he said, this is what we will do. So he's saying we're going to follow Isaiah 9:10. So this is prophetic, because everything he said happened because he said it. He didn't know it, but he spoke about a sycamore struck. He didn't know it. There was one that was just being found that day. He spoke about the other tree that would be planted in the place of the sycamore. It would happen 3 years later. He spoke about the stone that would start the building of this great rebuilding. That happened 3 years later. And then he said, we're going to follow this. So America has gotten worse. America has defied God since 9/11. And so that's the window. And one of the reasons why I was concerned about the return, about calling for the return, the National Day of Prayer and Repentance, is that I saw signs of the window coming to an end. And now we planned this years before, but the window coming to an end. And that's where we are. And what happens is, if the nation doesn't come back, then the window starts to end and the shakings resume on the nation. And it was all there. And I think it's important because I promise we're going to get into the actual form, the plague. But when we first talked about this, the Harbinger 1, and this is where the Harbinger 2 picks up, is that it speaks about this, and it says, I'm reading from Harbinger 1. At the first stage of judgment have been followed by no true conversion to the Lord, there will come a second. And it says that which, and in fact, it says that which God uses to call us back, if it doesn't happen, then greater shakings will come. Now these were actually from commentaries on Isaiah 9:10 from years and years and years ago, but it's speaking about that. And then I wrote and anybody can look in the chapter called Things to Come, that it says, and we alluded to this in the other program, but it says, how will they come? They may take the form of economic disintegration. Well, we're watching that. We've been watching economic disintegration. Or military defeat. We haven't seen that yet, but wait. Or it will take the form of disorder. We've got it right now. Division. We've got it. We've never been so divided. We've never had so much disorder. The collapse of infrastructure. We're watching infrastructure collapse right now. I mean, systems, businesses, government collapse right now. Man-made calamities, well, we've seen that, and natural, we've seen both. And so we're watching all these things happen now. And now talk about division. We're watching Americans pull down statues of George Washington. Now, we can imagine if it was a foreign army, but this is America. We're watching all those things take place. And in the same chapter called Things to Come, when I speak about the shakings that will come, I speak about the crown. And I use the word, the crown. I speak about America's crown, but I use that word crown when I'm speaking about the shakings to come. And the word crown comes from the word, is simply an English version of the word corona. Corona. So here it is, the shaking of America in the Harbinger is linked to the word corona, and even the timing. Now, this is important, the timing of these things. Because in that chapter, and again, anybody can look, in that chapter, Noriel asks the prophet, the chapter called Things to Come in the Harbinger. He said, well, how long is it between the first shaking, the strike, the enemy strike on the land, and the resuming, the coming of the greater shakings on the nation, the resuming of judgment? Well, there are two answers to that. And one answer is, in the case of the Southern Kingdom, it was 10 years from the warning strike to the coming of that. Now I wrote the Harbinger, it was 10 years after 9/11, so it couldn't be, that one couldn't be in play. But when I look back, I only realized that this last night. And that is that the Harbinger first came out on e-form before it became a book on the anniversary of 9/11 to the month of, it was the 10-year mark. But then the other pattern, the other template is, he said, well, how about in the case of the Southern Kingdom? And then he says, well, it began, the first strike came in the year 605 BC. That's when Nebuchadnezzar came and he first made the strike on the land, 605. So, but then the great coming of the shaking of the kingdom and the destruction came in the year 586 BC, and anybody can check that out. How many years between the two? There are 19 years. It's a 19-year template, 19-year pattern. 19 years are the years of judgment. 19-year window. So what happens if you take 2001, the time of the strike on America, and you go to the 19th year? What year does it bring you to? It brings you to the year of shaking, brings you to the year 2020. Will be the year of the shaking. Will be the year when what began with 9/11 resumes in full force. 2020, the year of the plague, the year of the riots, the year of the lockdown, the year of the economy collapsing, all happening according. That's why for years I've been looking at that year 2020. I've been looking at 20 because, and it's there. The math is there in the Harbinger. And so the 19th year, that is that. And think about it. What is this plague that's come upon America? What and hit America more than any nation? What is it? What is its name? We said corona, crown. That's in the chapter Things to Come. But corona what? COVID-19. the number of judgment. It's marking the time period from the first shaking 9/11 to now 2020. And it's not that they came up with it for that reason, but it's all there. And not only that, but in the Bible, it was the 19th year, it talks about it. The 19th year, Nebuchadnezzar comes in to destroy. 19th year, the judgment comes. 19th year. But Jeremiah says also in that 19th year is going to come a plague. So this is as heavy as we can even begin. But all the things we spoke about are coming to pass.
Wow.
Wow. Plague. I can't believe you have a chapter in this new book about the plague. When you wrote that, how long ago did you finish this book?
Well, I started writing it in January, and and I finished it, a while after. And then I'm writing about the shakings, and I'm writing about the biblical template, and then it starts happening. So then, then I'm seeing it as I'm writing. So yeah, it was amazing, and I want to get to this. We talked about the timing of it. But what about the nature of what's happened? Could what's happening around us, could it be part of this mystery that began with the harbinger, that begins in the Bible, of judgment? And so this is going to be very heavy. And in fact, there's even some things I'm not going to do that are in the harbinger uncensored, which are, if you can imagine it being heavier, that's there. But the thing is that first of all, can a pandemic, can a plague be a judgment? The principle goes throughout the Bible. Clearly in the Bible, God uses these things, used it in Egypt. Plagues were a judgment, used it on Israel. God uses it to call back people to him, to judge the gods, to shake nations, to bring them back to him. So we've got this global pandemic. Now I want to say before I get into it, because it is so heavy, and that is, first of all, this is not saying that there's only one cause for anything that happens. And number two, it's not saying that any particular person who gets struck by something, it means that they're guilty or more guilty than someone else. We're talking about national and global judgment. In the times of the Bible, when judgment came upon ancient Israel, the prophets were affected as well. It didn't mean that they were guilty. So it's not about that, but it is about the ultimate issue of a plague. Now, is there any specific sin that this generation is guilty of? I'm not only America, the whole world, but America particularly. And that is, we've watched this generation turn away from God as no other generation ever has, overturn biblical values, overturn what's been for thousands of years. We've never watched a generation so turn away from God. Well, we got that. But also, we've had no generation that has killed more babies than any other generation in world history. And that is not, the world has killed over 1.5 billion people. So there's more blood on our hands than any other generation, number one. And this is a sin that brings judgment in the Bible. Number two, America has been especially prominent in abortion. We kill more children than most nations. And we also have led much of the world into abortion. So we've got all that. And too much is given, more as much is required. But also think about it, what is the sin of abortion? It's the sin of the older of the generation against the younger of the generation. So now we've got a plague. And what does this plague do? This plague particularly strikes the old of the generation, the older, and particularly spares the young. In fact, the young may carry it, but it's the old, particularly like a biblical plague, are getting struck down by this more than any other. And then we also, when did abortion, we said, really began in America? Well, we said in New York, 1970, and then it was legalized across the land in 3 years later. So we are right at that point where the generation that began abortion is at its end. That whole page is about, we are now at the point where this is the entire generation from then to now are the people who began abortion, the people who approved abortion, the people who did nothing to stop the killing of the unborn. And this is who it's affecting, and who's infecting the people who began abortion are the ones who are the most old right now. And they're the ones who are most affected. So we got all that, but also, what do we see? It also affects, the law of the judgment is that at Jeremiah, when he saw the valley where they killed their children, he said, judgment's coming back to that place. So we have judgment coming to America, particularly. And by the way, where did the plague begin? Where are the most people killed by abortion? China. Began in China, and then it has focused on the nation that has really led the world in this, into abortion. So we said last time, what is the specific place where abortion has centered in America? New York. What was struck the hardest by death? New York State. What place in New York is the place where more babies are killed than any other place? New York City, the capital. And so more people, so the judgment came to New York and death came to New York. The very place that just a year earlier had said, we're going to expand abortion now, and said that, human life doesn't mean anything. Now they had to deal with human life in abortion. And what happened? They remember, if you remember from a few past shows, it was in New York that they put up this image of the god of death, Kali, the god of destruction and death. And they put that up on the high place on the Empire State Building. And now it was death over New York City. Now death came to New York City. And you know what? That same place, the Empire State Building, which bore the image of the god of death, now during this plague, they lit it up red, blood red. So now death had come to the very place as it's spoken in Jeremiah, that it would come to the same place. And there's something even heavier, which I'll reserve for the uncensored because it is so much, but I want to go even deeper. Now, where was it? New York was the state that through which abortion came to on demand came to America. So now they did a study and they found out that when they looked at people who were struck by this disease, this pandemic, and they found out that it came from that most of them, more than half, the majority of people who got the plague, it came from New York, New York City. New York was the place, as abortion came to America through New York, so the plague came to America largely through New York. And not only that, but there was another gate through which abortion came in 1970. It came after New York, wasn't as major, but it was the state of Washington, Seattle particularly. Well, where was the first official case of the plague in America? It was Washington State, Seattle. And the day, they found the case, it was called Patient Zero, and the next day made headlines all over America. The plague, the disease has come to America. And there was a date next to every headline in America. And the date was January 22nd. That is the date that America legalized the killing of children. It is the anniversary of abortion. And so on that date, it was all headlined across America that it had come to American soil. And not only that, but it was also the 1-year anniversary from the day that New York State passed that gruesome law and lit up the harbinger of defiance and the warning of destruction. They celebrated it by lighting up 1 year to the day. It all came back to New York, which is the Tophet or the Valley of Slaughter of America. So the capital of abortion in America became the capital of the plague in America and the entire world.
Wow.